forward. There's that. Chris will write down on there. We're trying to work with this technology as best we can. But I think first what we wanted to do, if possible, is for the commissioners and ex officios to look at last year's, or not last year's, the previous goals that we had. Look at the goal. So the first one was increase the commission's role in helping people who are suffering from gambling disorders. And then look at the objectives beneath the goal and just take 5 minutes and look and then let us know if you think that we achieved the goal and the objective, or if there's still one of those things that we might want to look forward to. And we're just going to combine these and see if maybe we missed some, and then determine if we want to kind of look at those moving forward when we're developing these next goals and strategies. And just kind of, so each person's, I think Commissioner Patterson doesn't necessarily believe we achieved one of the objectives, and or as I do, stuff like that. So we're just trying to flesh that out a little bit before we move forward to the next ones. Okay, so 10:57. Let's go until 11:05. If you could take a look at those.
So you want us to look at all 4 of the
goal, yeah,
the goals from last time. Okay, let's take a look.
I can pan out so you, Chris.
Okay, yeah. Make me look 10 pounds lighter. So this is 2018, 22 carryover. Yep.
Did you not need this?
No, there's,
Save this in case you need.
You need a Sherpa.
And this is just for me. You see what I have to get from my.
you think your handwriting. You might have to go by your notes and just throw them away.
Okay, so I think we are ready to go now to kind of look at the goals we had previously and what people thought that we achieved or didn't achieve. So, Commissioner Patterson, do you want to?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
So under our first goal, which is to increase the commission's role in helping people who are suffering from gambling disorders, I looked at the objectives, and many of our objectives, or some of our objectives with regard to this goal, have been delayed and have not been accomplished because of COVID. And COVID had a huge impact on the ability of the Problem Gambling Task Force to do its work. I will tell you all that its work should be accomplished. I'm going to venture a guess by the end of November, you'll see that work accomplished, but it took 2.5 years. It was work that was supposed to take 1.5 years. So the first objective was not completed. The second, the increasing public awareness around problem gambling. I think that's something that we could have a broader discussion about. What we think our role is in that and how we can do a better job with that. The third objective, I think, is up to the Problem Gambling Task Force and the prevalence study. The information that came from the prevalence study will help us with the funding question. And then at that time, back then, we wanted to explore the idea of revising the RCW to increase this agency's problem gambling responsibility, because there are many commissions in the country that have a broader responsibility with regard to this social problem. And I don't know if we attempted to do that. I don't know where we are on that. I'd like to know more about that. And the stakeholders have had tremendous involvement through the Problem Gambling Task Force. So that last one, I think, is okay. The second objective, which is to strengthen legislative relationships. With regard to the second objective, the white paper process, are we doing that, Tina?
So we did it for the law enforcement for the 5051. We sought legislative input on topics. So we did arrange. So I don't know that we've actually done a white paper. We gave quite a few legislative updates.
Okay, so
But not a white paper. Informed. Please bear in mind that I was not responsible.
that's okay. That's all I need.
So
What I just want to say, I don't know that this is necessary.
Right, I was reading through these.
Yeah,
It's not even
I-
me.
I think that this was an objective at the time. I don't know that we achieved this objective, but I don't particularly feel strongly about that. I feel that we're being informed in other ways that are very effective. So that's my take on that.
Okay.
Objective number 3, I see that we are doing that. I think we're doing those things. Staff continuity and succession planning, I'm going to skip over that. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to leave that up to you, Tina, to let us know how we're doing there. I know that we do want continuity and we do want succession planning. That's all I know. And then with the last one, strengthen stakeholder relationships. We didn't, the last one, we thought we wanted to have a summit where we were going to bring everybody together to have this big, broad discussion with stakeholders, and everybody was going to come to it's like a big party, and we didn't do that. At this point in time, I don't really know that I want to do that, but that's something we didn't achieve, and I personally would not put that back on the list. So that was my quick analysis of the whole thing. Thank you.
Perfect. So my thoughts were, in the problem gambling, it said we'd focus on prevention of minors and youths. And that might still be kind of, we're waiting on the problem gambling study, but I don't feel like we've talked or focused on that at all, necessarily, like particularly keeping them out of gambling until they're of age or whatnot. And then under the goal 4, strengthen stakeholder relationships, it said, build better relationships with nonprofits. And I guess I'm not sure why we said that or what we meant entirely. And I don't know that it's happened, but that would be something to maybe talk about. I'm not sure. And then the same gambling summit, I'm also not sure why we wanted that. And I guess I don't care about it anymore. I was like, I don't think we did it, but yes. So, let's see, Commissioner Lawson or Sizemore.
I'm just going to defer to the materials that were submitted in the commission packet by staff on what's been completed and what's in progress, as well as to my fellow commissioners who were on the commission when the last strategic plan was done and have a better idea of what was intended and what they wanted to see versus what actually occurred.
Commissioner Sizemore?
So when I took a look at these, and I didn't dive down into the objectives that much for my assessment, but I mean, goal 1, I think it felt like we basically met goal 1 or achieved a lot of work towards goal 1. It was, measurable by seeing the task force, the prevalency study, and yeah, we had, a pandemic impact on a lot of that. And some of these objectives could have been furthered had we not had that. So generally goal 1 felt like we made really good progress and met some of those. And I'll add that, this is an area in my mind that I think we really stepped up as an agency in this area. And it's my belief for the conversation going forward that we can't forget the topic, but I think we need to step back and have, true behavioral health experts kind of leading on that stuff and figure out what our role is in assisting them. The strengthen legislative relationships, and I think this was probably one that I pushed on a little bit in 2018. We had a history of being a pretty passive agency when it came to legislative footprint up on the Hill, to the extent that there really wasn't, if a legislator said they didn't like something, then we kind of threw up our hands and we were done. And it felt like we as an agency shifted from that passive approach to a more advocacy based legislative program. So I feel very good about how our agency did in that meeting that. Goal 3, I mean, external and internal factors blew it up. I mean, it really, needs a reboot. I feel like over the last few months, it's kind of being rebooted right now. But yeah, some of that work planning's underway. I think that based on, both external and internal factors, this would be really hard to accomplish what we laid out in 2018. And strengthen shareholder relationships. I mean, it feels like there's been good work done on this. I seem to recall that the nonprofit relationship aspect was a byproduct of legislation. We kept seeing people having trouble with duck raffles and, so we ended up having legislative kind of intervention on some of these things, and it just didn't seem like we were necessarily seeing eye to eye with those nonprofits and how we would act in that space. But all in all, I mean, I felt like there was a lot of good work done towards goal 4. And, there's some hard ones in here that, they're going to be an ongoing effort.
Are there any ex officios? I think Commissioner Reeves had to step away for a minute, but
I would, on the goal, I think Julia hit it on the nail. It's in progress, delayed by COVID. I do have an idea that what we really need to have is someone on staff at the Gambling Commission who has problem gambling as one of their objectives. I think too often we're relying upon the task force here to do what and I would hope that would help strengthen our compact negotiations around problem gambling, because I think problem gambling task force has suffered from lack of information, which can only be achieved through compact negotiations. Our legislative relationships, I agree with Bud, are much better. I do think we need to have our minority party more directly involved with this there. I do also, under legislative relationships, point out, I think important on legislative relationships is executive department relationships as well. And I know that the director meets periodically with the governor's office, but I'm not sure whether I think that needs to be strengthened. I would only point out on goal 3 that staff continuity and succession planning has been impacted by COVID and retirement. And I know that the staff is adjusting to that. So, and in terms of strengthening stakeholder relationships, I'm aware of the fact that we have not had a good, solid relationship with all stakeholders. I think we have, what has been happening is that the tribes have become a more important part of the Gambling Commission's work. And we need to also try to retain relationships with the other stakeholders in gambling, namely the for-profit and nonprofit divisions. And I'm not sure how we do that. I think they're a diverse group as well, and it's hard to make connections. So that would be my observations. Thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone else? Representative Clova? I'm not seeing anyone, but, oh, there she is.
Oh, just wanted to let you know I'm lurking, I'm listening.
Okay, that's fine.
And I don't think I have anything to add. I think there's some agreement on what we've heard so far. But I think more generally, when I think of those 3, as Commissioner Reeves was calling them swim lanes, I kind of think of them, if we're trying to make sure that they're sort of equally considered, I think of them as pillars, because you can't take away one of them. They're all important for the structure of the organization. But so anyway, I think I've heard a little bit of it, but I want to re-emphasize that I really do think that problem gambling should be called out very specifically. And whether it's people or relationships or whichever the pillars, and it may occur in more than one pillar, I think definitely it should be called out very specifically.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I think that we kind of have all pointed out similar things. I do want to say, looking at this and these goals that were huge and so many objectives, that the staff did an absolutely amazing job getting to where we got. I'm very appreciative of that. There's only a couple things that I think the commission as a whole needs to just kind of work on still, that we just found through that exercise. So I think now, do we kind of keep those in mind as we move forward, looking at our new goals? Right, is that everybody in agreement to kind of move forward? We can start with the people goal and start with what the staff had laid out and kind of go through what build a stronger workforce means to everybody. And as we're doing that, just keep in mind some of the things we just heard that might still need to be improved upon a little bit. So,
Comment. Can we encourage staff that are on teams to chime in on this stuff? I mean, I really think that we would greatly benefit from input from staff, because we have most of the agency, various levels, and I just want to encourage it. That even if it's a hard conversation, I think we benefit from it.
I will share that this was our idea, Chris and I, to come up with this this plan, these goals and objectives based on staff's input and state and licensees' input on Monday. So I have not shared this with them. Okay, so this was not a brainstorming of them. This was like, because this was meant to kind of take all the information and kind of plant some seeds. But so I'm more not trying to say, no, they can participate, but just so you're aware, this has not been something that has been part that they have just actively engaged in.
yeah, and I think there's no pressure to any of the staff. You don't feel like you have to speak up or anything, but if you have an idea of moving forward. And also, we kind of touched on this a little bit, I think, but the previous goals were more commission-based. And I would like these ones to be more agency-based. And then if there's specific things the commissioners can do to push those forward, maybe we can draw on that, right? And kind of build, so we're all working together towards common goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think to maybe sort of help give this direction, why don't we as commissioners kind of chime in on what we think the people part looks like, and then ask for staff to, or give an opportunity for staff to give their input.
Sounds good. Whoever wants to start.
You'd think that if I had these great ideas, then I would have something to kick it off, but I do not.
Yeah. Slide.
Okay, so you want to start with people?
Sure. I have some thought. I mean, and I mentioned earlier to Commissioner Patterson, I'm not crazy about this process. I don't feel like I'm yeah, my brain just doesn't work this way, but so hopefully I can contribute by just throwing out some ideas, and somebody else will write them in a way that both the public and the staff and we as commissioners could say, okay, yeah, I know what we mean by that. So one of the things, and maybe this is just a consideration, I don't know whether it is additive or not, but I mean, I think we have to, excuse me, think about what our workforce is. And we have, from, kind of profession kind of backgrounds, we mostly have accountants and law enforcement folks, essentially. That's kind of the professions that have historically been the most involved in our work because of the financial and law enforcement aspects of the work. So we have folks in different pension systems. And so as folks work up a career ladder within the agency, just starting from there, do we create, barriers to people moving up in the organization due to a pension system, represented, unrepresented, having a badge, not having a badge? Are we thinking about, those types of things when we are evaluating our workforce and evaluating growth of the workforce into, whatever each individual ends up wanting to become. And then, we have to also contend with the fact that we are a second career for a lot of folks. Folks that are trained in law enforcement, or at least historically, and I think we ought to contemplate whether we want to continue being a landing place for second careers, former troopers, former local law enforcement folks, or outside the state law enforcement folks. And I guess the last kind of piece that, I think has to be contemplated is, how are we viewed from the outside? Is the Gambling Commission, the agency, a desirous employer? And what are we doing to elevate that, subjective view of potential employees or a potential workforce? So those are just my random thoughts on this. I don't know if it helps us at all.
Whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So within this people swim lane, I think my two biggest items, I don't want to call them goals or objectives. My two biggest items would be, one, that we have a competent and well-trained group of agency staff. And I'm not saying that I haven't seen incompetence or ill-trained people within this agency. I know from dealing with other certain federal agencies, I see that type of thing. And so from I guess my personal experience, I like it when people are competent and well-trained and helpful. And so whatever we need to do to make sure that our people meet those three criteria. And then my second item kind of just calls back to what was set up as a objective in goal 3 under the previous strategic plan. So this item number 4, be the employer of choice, which sort of relates back to what Bud was talking about. How do we make this agency the place where everybody wants to work? And I know that we probably have some guardrails as to what we can do and what we can offer just based on being a state agency and the benefits package and things like that. But I would leave it to staff to look at, what else can we offer within the agency that would make it a very highly attractive place to work, if not the most attractive place to work. One thing that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is, we have our gaming lab, which gives you the opportunity to play with all of these gaming machines that come in. How do we find the people that would appeal to, and start talking that up? So, thank you. Where else are you paid to play video games? Basically.
Something tells me
Yes.
pushing the same button 1,000 times to see if it fails is probably.
Maybe not that exciting, but
Does anyone on the teams have anything to add right
All right, Madam Chair.
now? Yeah, go ahead, Senator Conway.
Yeah, I have just one area that I think that I want to make reference to, and that is the changing nature of gambling in Washington State. and the need to ensure that we're allocating our staff accordingly. It's my perception that compact negotiations have become a major part of the activity of the Gambling Commission. And that I would argue that it's important for us to recognize exactly what we need in that arena in terms of compact negotiations. And I think we need to ensure that our staff assignments are adjusted to that reality. I don't know enough internally here, but my observation is that compact negotiations have become critical to the Gambling Commission. And do we necessarily have our staff aligned to the needs of that compact negotiations? And so just an observation I've had for many years. I'm a firm believer in staff training too, in building a strong workforce and diverse. I mentioned diversity to you, but I also think we need to examine ways in which our staff can find the training opportunities to adjust to the changing world, and probably are doing that. So those are just some observations that I've had, but I'm truly concerned about the compact negotiations becoming so critically important to the Gambling Commission. And I only point out there that collective bargaining, compact negotiations to me are somewhat like collective bargaining. At least that's been my observation. And that we probably need to ensure that we adjust our staff allocations to that model so that we have, most of these tribes are evolving out there and they're using lawyers in compact negotiations. And I just think that we need to consider the challenge of that. Thank you.
All right, Representative Klobuchar?
Thank you. And I just want to add a second to Commissioner Lawson. I do think there's a good rationale to expand a little bit on that word, the building a strong workforce. And I think her competent, forget the other two, were a very good way to further define strong. And I think maybe Senator Conway also mentioned this, but adding in the word diverse, I think would be very good. And it seems to me that that also would help on the process swim lane that we're going to get to later about cultivating an innovative culture, because we do know that the more diverse perspectives we have in the room as decisions are being made and the activities of the commission are being executed, having a more diverse workforce can help to help us be more innovative.
Thank you. Commissioner Patterson.
So under the topic of people and the subject matter of a strong workforce, I have a specific recommendation. And that is that I think that this agency needs to have a specific person who can become our point person, our specialist in-house on the topic of problem gambling. And this person would not be involved in treatment or anything like that. But there are so many questions that come up for us about to what extent will this policy that we're considering affect problem gambling? I've heard that question asked countless times in these rooms. And it's a topic that comes up in compact negotiation. Every time we have a compact, many times when we have a compact negotiation. I don't think we need someone that we don't have to hire a staff person specifically for this topic, but I do think that we need a point person here I think that Roxanne is in another agency and is overwhelmed with her work in another agency. I think that it's disingenuous to think that we can depend upon her to answer our questions. And I think that that other agency, the Healthcare Authority, would welcome having someone in our agency with whom they could work. So we have online gambling that we're going to be continuing to deal with. We have sports wagering, a lot of recommendations coming down from the task force. We cannot pretend that we can do our work in a vacuum without considering the impacts to addiction, to gambling addiction in this agency. So I'd like to recommend that we have our executive director bring us some ideas on how we can increase our ability to specialize in this area so that when we commissioners have questions, we have some answers.
Commissioner Patterson, do you know if that's going to be a recommendation of the problem gambling task?
I believe it is. I believe it is. And again, thank you for reminding me of that. I just want to remind you all that, yeah, that will be a recommendation, and there will be really solid recommendations, really helpful recommendations to this agency coming forward. But I wanted to bring that one up because it was on point with what we're talking about right now.
Commissioner Sizemore?
So I hate disagreeing with, especially with people that I appreciate and respect, but I really think that we need to, you know, kind of lean a little bit on our, you know, mission, and that's keeping gambling legal and honest. And I think we're in a position to where we can help a lot with problem gambling, responsible gambling, by, you know, the levers that we have available to us in rulemaking, compact negotiations. I think that we have ability to impact that. But this is this is a behavioral health issue that I really think we need to, if we hadn't, you know, and I'm going to give you the most credit, Vice Chair, if we had not been beating this drum for the last half a dozen years, this state would be nowhere close to understanding the magnitude of the problem. But I really want our agency to figure out what we can do to make forward progress on this issue of importance to the state. And that's in, you know, how we direct our licensees to act and how we negotiate with tribes to have them assisting us. And I think there's multiple examples of how tribes are taking this very seriously and investing a lot of resources to make an impact. So while I don't disagree that problem gambling is an important thing and ought to be on our mind, I am, especially in a strategic plan, I'm reticent to say that we need a person that's the vast majority of their interest. I want all of our leadership in each of the legs of the organization to have knowledge about problem gambling and how it interfaces with their lane. So that's how my perspective on this is, that it feels like this next strategic plan, I think it's hard, but if we can find where we fit in moving the ball forward on problem responsible gaming, that's where I feel. And I don't know if we want to continue that conversation. I had a couple other items that I was gonna mention. Just for us to keep in mind that, and I mentioned, earlier about, we're primarily accountants and law enforcement. We have historically, had a lot of folks come from, into this as a second career. I think we ought to be giving consideration that, sometimes the historic norms, if we just keep going down those paths, that could be a hindrance. I mean, we could, just because we've always done it a particular way, doesn't mean that I think that we should evaluate whether the historic norms of the workforce and who we're getting and when we're getting them, we should be evaluating that. And then I think that we shouldn't be afraid to make sure that we utilize both the state and the agency HR departments as they should be, and make sure that they're staying in their lane. They're being that resource that is additive to leadership of the agency and not driving policy.
I am clarification, Madam Chair. I'm not interested in seeing this agency hire someone whose only job is to advise us on problem gambling. What I'm recommending is that we have a point person who makes this more of an area of expertise, so that when we have a question, I've heard this question come up very often, how will this particular policy or this decision that we are going to make affect problem gambling? In other words, how addictive is this?
Is there an objective answer to that question, or is it generally going to be subjective?
Well, we do have a great deal more information available to us now because of the prevalence study and the problem gambling task force work that's been done over the past 2.5 years. And that information could really inform us, I think, moving forward. We didn't have this information before. We were making decisions in a vacuum. We've been asking the tribes to increase their contribution to problem gambling. We pulled a number out of the air and asked them for it, and 10 of them agreed. But now we have much more specific information. And what I'm suggesting is simply that we have someone on staff that makes a point of becoming knowledgeable and also, who is knowledgeable about these things.
So I guess I have a question.
Sure.
Does that fit within our overall strategic plan for the next 5 years? Or is that something where we call Tina separately and say, hey, someone trained up on this a little better? You know what I mean? Like how are we fitting this in a goal that we're going to measure? And then is it like, I guess.
Can I paraphrase what I'm hearing and maybe offer a suggestion and not to overspeak at all?
Go for it.
Here you're saying that you need some analysis on what's going on, the situation, so that you have an informed decision that creates activity around it. And I think maybe what would be helpful here is to define what indicators you're looking for. We can absolutely capture those where they exist and then offer that presentation on a standby basis and include it in any type of conversation that you want. But I think right now is a loosely defined performance indicator. The data's out there. We just gotta categorize it and present it.
Within the last 3 months, there was a question raised in one venue that I was in about how something that we were considering would impact addictive gambling behavior. I'm using this as an example. And there was no information provided to that question at that time. And if we at least had someone who could say, I'm on it, and where we could feel comfortable knowing that we had a staff person who knew who to call and who knew where to go for that information and who could bring us the best information that was out there. I think that would be very comforting for me as a commissioner when it came to decision-making about our policies.
So would an overall strategic plan be more of something of the agency having an available network of employees who people could reach out to when they have specific questions, or commissioners could reach out to develop kind of a, what's the role, what's this person going to know, who should we contact, so that you're not calling 3 or 4 different staff members to try to get something, or what? I'm just trying to build it into how does this?
Well, and is it an assessment tool?
Right.
What are the, I mean, and I know we do the small business, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but
Oh, small business economic and, the small business economic impact statements for rules. Is
Right.
that what you were-
so that's a formal thing,
Right.
that probably was thrust upon us. Or we chose to, I'm
No,
not
it's-
sure.
It's a requirement of the
Right.
state law.
So I don't know whether there's some creation of an assessment tool that you can plug in the issue and it spits out
Not yet.
because otherwise, I mean, otherwise you just have one person's opinion if it's one person, or it's like, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if there's I mean, because I'm all on board if there's some sort of assessment tool that gives us the impact to addictive behavior.
We have that now through the prevalence study, we have that information. We wouldn't ask staff for their opinion. We would ask them for information.
But if I can enter in here, I like Julia's idea, and I kind of mentioned it myself earlier. Our problem is that we are working with 29 sovereign tribes who are under compact language to provide a certain percentage of their dollars for problem gambling. And that is a provision of the X2 agreement, if I understand it right. And yet, what we have found through the task force is that the tribes do meet that obligation, but there's a serious problem here in understanding the numbers they're working with and what they are doing in their separate worlds. And I don't know, the only real way in which you have an opportunity to request that information is through compact negotiations. And I don't know any other way, you know, our compact negotiators always, you know, they meet our obligation because but we have no idea of what goes on there. Now, one of the recommendations that's probably come out of the task force is to establish a permanent problem gambling on a state basis committee. And maybe the gambling commission will obviously be represented on that. But all I'm saying here is that there's this huge, and I think we all recognize it, the huge gap in knowledge about how our tribal partners are, what they're doing on problem gambling. And it's our compact process is the only way in which we really have an opportunity to discuss that. And I don't know how we get to the information. Julie has a great idea, I think, and just having a staffer on board who will work with our compact negotiators on this issue so that we can move more quickly to understand the the services that are being utilized here in this problem gambling environment. Healthcare Authority has no ability to do that, Bud, because they don't negotiate with the tribe. We're the ones that negotiate with the tribe. And so this is an issue and it needs to be there needs to be a solution. All right. And I don't know what it is. I think the idea of having a staffer on the Gambling Commission who's helping us gather that information is a great idea.
So for my, anybody else before me? I guess, Bud, one of the questions I often have here as a commissioner is, are we promoting policy that is worsening the problem? And we don't always have the answer to that. I don't know that we can always get the answer to that, but with the help of a little more expertise, we might at least know which questions to ask. So I would ask you to indulge me in my request, at least to the extent that we ask staff to bring us some ideas on how that might work. Again, not hiring an employee specifically for this topic, not hiring anyone that has anything to do with social services, but assigning the responsibility of helping us to better understand how our decisions affect problem gambling, assigning that responsibility to somebody.
Okay, so is that a specific objective then, to build a stronger?
I think we've captured
Okay.
problem gambling, the whole challenge, the issue as a focus area. And I think we're already starting to get into some of the lower levels that will come,
Right.
but we have loud and clear got that on there. Yeah.
Can we move it to process though, rather than people?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're a better process guy than I am. I'm much
That's what
better
I
at
was
people.
getting at next. I guess I'm curious to see how these are gonna come out as. Anyhow, process. So what do we have? Promote fair and equitable license compliance programs, cultivate innovative culture. And what's that last one?
Oh, modernize business strategies. Sorry about my writing.
That said murder. And I was like,
I know, I did too. I was like, I'm sure it doesn't say murder, so.
Just the same.
Let's not rule it out though.
Bud's really on a roll today.
All the sharp objects.
All right, so what do we have for process? Whoever wants to start.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if Commissioner Reeves
Oh, we did.
is joined us or not.
Can I see her?
The one topic that she mentioned yesterday, for equitable, sustainable, and inclusive funding. That was something that I thought could fall under the promote fair and equitable licensing program. It certainly could fit under.
I can't.
as well.
Would you repeat that again, please?
The funding mechanism that Commissioner Reeves mentioned yesterday,
Yes.
finding a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive funding, or, making sure our license fees and license structure that we use moving forward is.
Does that really, is that code or no, I'm not saying she was providing code, but does that maybe mean that we would be determining license fees based on some numeric value? I mean, aren't they capped right now? Aren't those fees capped?
What I understood her to say is based on the actual work that we're doing, tie it to our expenditures, rather than just saying everyone's gonna pay a 6% increase. My takeaway, I don't know if she's here or not.
Well, we already got rid of the across the board can occur, but we now have a way to do individual activities, right?
Yeah, I was just
Right.
kind of pointing out, she mentioned yesterday that that was something. So that certainly could fit under modernized business strategies, if that's something that you want to consider or not, or under promote fair and equitable licensing.
So did I just hear you say, I want to make sure I heard you correctly, that it would be considering whether or not we reconfigure our licensing structures such that we are billing people based on the amount of time and effort that our staff are putting into that work?
I believe that's what I understood her
Well,
to say.
Maybe we should wait to see if she comes back.
So I was just
a little confused.
Yeah, I can set that aside.
Yeah.
Well, I will say it.
Okay.
I'll say it. I don't know.
Okay.
I really want to hear what she meant,
Yes.
but I'd like to throw that out there as a possibility that we consider that.
So we will monitor when I'm sure she'll come back on camera soon. Yep, we can move on.
We can move on to cultivate an innovative culture.
I mean, yes, we can
Process.
talk about any of the process items.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to do the same thing where you all go through process?
Well, Bud's the process guy.
Well, so, I mean, I have a bit of a specific area in process that I think we could spend the next 5 years working on. And that is a focus, and again, this will need to be wordsmithed and sussed out, but focus, create emphasis on illegal gambling activities and our efforts to mitigate up to and including prosecution.
Hmm.
Which I think meets our mission and values and has felt like we're handcuffed a little bit.
It's a toughie.
Probably some solutions possible.
Especially the and prosecution.
I think there's models in the country that maybe we could look at that would include prosecutorial support. There's systems in the state that are used through the AG's office that have prosecutors as part of the investigative process.
That's good.
I like it.
So the modernized business strategy. So I mean, I know it's just an example or a possible objective. What's the measurable, like, I mean, there's got to be something in mind or something that came from the SWAT that, I mean, it can't just mean like we've done what's it called, the portal,
Oh, my account.
my account. Yeah, I mean, we did, I mean, that, when I think about what that
But it
was in
needs to-
2014 versus
So
now.
it's still the same. We have not been able to update my account since we put it into place because of our legacy system. So once we update our computer system, hopefully it opens the world that we can actually make some significant improvements for what's available to our licensees, what we can offer and how people do business with us.
So can we as a commission, I mean, the IT modernization project, I mean, I don't know if we can make it go any faster.
Do you know if you have business analyst experience?
So I guess when you were brainstorming that, what
Yeah.
were you getting at? I don't understand.
So it could also be looking at our funding as Priscilla mentioned yesterday, we do need to address funding. Maybe there's a more, maybe we can tie it to our expenditures so that we're not having to come back every 5 or 6 years. We change the fees with dials and levers with rule changes and then come back and have to do that every 5 or 6 years. Maybe there's a process, maybe we decide that we want to make changes to it every year. I don't know, but diving in and, raising things up once and then riding that wave for 5 or 6 years, maybe is that just still the best way to move forward with our funding? That could be one area. And then just making some improvements on how we conduct business with our licensees and tribal partners. Can we modernize some of those things that are still paper-based? Can we move to online applications for all areas? We can't. I mean, those are dreams right now because of our systems are just not able to do that.
Well, and that's where, to me, it feels like if there's anything that we can do to move that process along quicker, and that's, help me, help you. I don't know how, what is it are there any actions that we can take or, strategic plan,
Unfortunately, right now, we're stuck trying to find a business analyst. We've had people on close to being hired, making offers, and we cannot find a business analyst. So that's why we're changing directions and trying to hire a consultant.
What if we invested in a consultant to help us find a business analyst?
Well, we've just hired a consultant right
I
now.
have a update on that. So the purchase contract was set out there for bid and there's interest coming in, and that's built with the business analyst, program manager, possibly a tester, and the data analysis piece. It's all out there, what we need from the IT modernization part of it. And we have the timeline in the very near future. I'm talking October, November, where we will score the contract, interviews, all that stuff, and get ready to start. So I think we have brought it to the surface somewhat, and now we just got to go through the process of it. I don't know if there's anything to unstick at this point, but let it work through its process right now in this step.
So thank you. And then another thing that was brought forward was just being able to be more agile and proactive to be able to react to changes in the gambling industry with technology. So as new technology is introduced into the industry, staff is not, we're bare, we told you, we have 90 staff, right? We think at a bare minimum, we need 114. So just trying to do the mission critical work is challenging. So we are not, and we have not, and this would be a COVID symptom, right? We have not had staff attend training to see what the industry trends are and to be able to speak to something that's brought before us. Hey, what about this? Where are you guys at with this? And either at the commissioner level, stakeholder, tribal partners, we're not up to speed on the latest information. We haven't even had the basic knowledge transfer yet. So that would be something that at least have that basic understanding. And it could fit within, having, as Bud mentioned, moving to a process, because I see that similar to your suggestion for having someone knowledgeable about the impacts to problem gambling. Because that ties into, I think, more of a process component, and then trying to find the staff availability to take on that additional level of work.
Senator Conway's had his hand up for quite a while.
Yeah, I would just add to this conversation that, I'm very involved with the Department of Retirement Systems here, and they have relationships with other states in terms of the Department of Retirement payments, et cetera. And I just would encourage us to ensure that we are reaching out to our partners in other states in terms of some of this challenge. I know the NCSL you might be able to help here, I'm not sure, but I just think that there is, often we we get tunnel visions in our states and we can actually learn through other states what they're doing. And I hope we're using that tool to help us guide us here.
Just thinking, so I had a conversation with someone previously and they were, sort of interested in putting together some sort of committee or task force on technology with some people from the Gambling Commission and then tribal leaders and other stakeholders so that we could all kind of work together to stay ahead and have a view, like this is where the tribes see coming in, this is what other people see coming in, so that we can continually try to stay ahead of it. I don't know if that's, something that would be worthwhile, but.
From my observation, that's what they were doing, within the IT world, OCIO, they have the network of colleagues within the state agency system, and they're always reaching out to, if anyone does reach out across industry, well, it's IT, and they're always looking for the best new thing, and they're sharing practices. And so I think when you send them a project, go do, that's just part of their nature.
Don't get me wrong, we do reach out to other states and we do have a lot of connections and relationships and part of organizations. And so it's not like we're on an island without any cell phone service. So we definitely do have some contacts. And we do, that is the first thing, is how are other states dealing with this new technology or this new way of changing gambling in terms of payment mechanisms or et cetera. So yeah, thank you.
Well, we are members of Nickel G's, which I think is been around for a couple of years, I think, and Representative Kloba is working her way into running the place. So I think that certainly is one venue, and I just mentioned it as an example of where I think we're creating those relationships with other states that will pay dividends. So I have one more thing to add here, if on process. So, and I think it ties in with all of this, is that, and I don't know what how we get there, but I think it is important for we, the agency, to know where the public, the legislative and executive branches' attitudes are on gambling. And so when I hear, oh, there's all this new technology, okay, well, our gambling statute is such that it's illegal unless it's expressly authorized. So if it does us no good to be up to speed on all the technology if it's not authorized. So, when I think about sports wagering, that's the last time that the legislature's weighed in on gambling. And so it feels to me there, some way, whatever the tools are, I think if we are making assumptions about how the public, B, the legislature, or C, the executive branch, are thinking about gambling in 2022, 2025, I think we're going to miss on some of our proposals.
I think we should take a break quickly, maybe, and everybody can get lunch.
So I think you mean like a 5-minute break,
Yes.
so that we can, so people on
I was gonna
Zoom
say,
is
yeah.
hybrid, yeah,
And
then we'll do a working lunch.
yeah, let's do a 5-minute break or 10, 5 minutes is good. And then we'll come back and work, just kind of.
Go Ems.
The game starts at 1:07.
I know.